All right, and welcome back to another edition of Falls Count Radio, the interview series. I believe this is number 5 in the series, maybe 6. But today we're joined with one of the true up and coming superstars of the independent scene. If you haven't seen her yet, you will very soon. We're talking about the one and only professional wrestler that to be certified by the USDA from the grasslands of North Dakota. We're talking to freerangekara. How you doing today, Kara?
I'm
Doing
doing
real
good.
good.
How are
Thanks for
you?
coming on the show, especially on you know such a busy day. I'm sure your days get pretty busy, so definitely appreciate you making the time.
Well, yeah, thanks
Absolutely.
for having me.
So I'm just going ahead and get started into it. I got some questions about your career, some kind of fun questions that I think a lot of people have seemed to enjoy over the past. So first, just starting at the beginning, did you grow up a wrestling fan? And if so, who were some of your favorites?
I actually didn't get into wrestling until I was about 16 or 17 years old. I actually stumbled upon it accidentally after watching something else on the USA Network, and Raw was next. And me and my sister were like, we've heard that this is, it's fake, so let's watch it, see how fake it is. And here I am. Let's see, 10 years later.
Do you remember anything about like who you saw that made you say this is interesting? Was it anything like that happen?
Yeah, I really liked R Truth and John Morrison, but the guy who really caught my eye, and I know it's kind of taboo now, but like CM Punk was the first guy that I really latched onto
Yeah, I
in
was always a
wrestling.
huge CM Punk guy, but originally I'm from Chicago too, so kind of like seeing him make all those references, I was like, I one of the few people who probably knows what he's talking about. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, and if that era, just with the when you mentioned the John Morrison and R Truth thing, like that was a pretty good
Mm-hmm.
era for Punk too. So that was almost the perfect time to see him. Um,
Mm-hmm.
So when you started getting into wrestling, did you mention your sister there? Did your family support you?
They let us do it. They didn't really care for it.
When you say they let us, did your sister get into wrestling too?
She kind of fell off after we stopped watching together, and then I kind of got my even younger sister into it when I would come home for holidays. But I think she's kind of fallen off too. So I think it's just me now.
When you started getting into wrestling, how did you go about getting into a training school, and who trained you?
I got trained at the academy up in Minneapolis. At the time, there were 5 trainers there. There was Ken Anderson, Sean and Arya Davari, Eric Cannon, and Molly Holly. So I really had like a really nice, well-rounded group to learn from, which was really cool.
Do you have any interesting stories from your training there?
Um, Not really. I mean, it was. I have to assume it's pretty standard training. Promos, body slams, practice matches, loads and loads of practice matches. Just kind of watching all my classmates kind of discover who they are in wrestling. That was
Right,
really cool to
for
watch.
sure. How long were you training before you had your first match?
I think I trained for about it was either 4 or 6 months.
So, if I'm correct, your first match was for Fully Loaded. It was on October 20th of 2017 with Jason Strife. Do you have any memories of that evening?
I remember being so nervous, just absolutely, literally shaking in my boots, like so worried about it because it's
Right.
your first match, like you're anything could happen. And bless him, he walked me through it. We had I've watched it back and it's not good, but I had my first match, and it's cool that I did
What
that.
we've heard so many stories from people talking about first match in front of like 22 people. Do you remember approximately how many people were at
Mm-hmm.
that show?
I mean, it was probably around that, at most
Right.
probably 30, but I really don't remember the crowd from that night
A
at
couple
all.
years ago, I interviewed Lady Frost, and her first match was on Raw against Asuka. Uh, so you could imagine in front of that crowd what a different experience it probably was for her.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, One of the more common opponents that you've had is Sierra. What are some memories of working with Sierra?
I love working with Sierra. I always know that, like, we've wrestled each other so many times by now that you just go out there and you just like, oh yeah, you do your stuff, I do my stuff. I could, I could probably have a match with her with my eyes closed.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure there's a few people like that that you've wrestled. Um, and you've wrestled under a couple different personas and looks. Uh, Also wrestling under a name of Paranoia, which I just think is a fantastic name. Do you have a favorite of your characters? Would it be like that, or the free range care that you're doing now? Do you have any favorites or anything?
Um, I do have a special place in my heart for Paranoia just because that's who I started as, and like I had a lot of memories as Paranoia. But free range Kara is more true to who I am as a person. So like I really feel like more comfortable, and I feel like I'm having better matches as free range Kara.
So in your real life, do you do like farming type of stuff?
I used to. I grew up on a beef cattle farm for the first 18 years of my life, so it's very like ingrained into my memories and kind of going into my future like choices I've made in my life. It's all very based from
So it's a little
home.
bit more natural for you. Nice.
Yeah.
Um, you've only been wrestling just about 5 years now, but you've been in the ring with a lot of well-known names like Jordan Grace, Kiera Hogan, Leva Bates, Jazz, Priscilla Kelly. Out of them and all of your opponents, who's your favorite person that you've ever worked with?
Ooh, that's a good one. I'd have to let me think. Wrestling Kiera was really like a really special one for me. But also like when I finally got to wrestle Eric Cannon after 5 years, like that was a really special one for me too, being as he's the guy that I consider like my main trainer. Like he's really helped me develop even after like being at the wrestling school. Like he's really helped me advance my career.
Nice. Yeah, it's always good too when it's someone that you know that you get to kind of show how you've developed over that time. Um, why was it special
Yeah.
wrestling Kiera?
It was just one of those things like it wasn't actually supposed to happen. Like originally we had different opponents planned for the night, and I was like, oh, that'd always be cool to wrestle Kiera Hogan because she's on AEW, she's
Right.
on Impact, so like she's very like in the now and like working places that I'd like to work. So getting to wrestle her was pretty cool. I should also mention Badger Briggs. She's relatively new to wrestling, but every single match I've had with Badger has been one of my favorites.
Nice. Yeah, that's a name that's not on my radar, so I'll definitely have to keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, she's just coming back from a torn ACL and meniscus, so I'm very excited to have her back and to fight
Yeah,
her
well,
again.
hopefully that'll happen soon, and on one of these shows that we see on like Fight TV or something like that, we'll all be able to see that. You mentioned one of the things about
Yeah.
Kiera that was so special is that she was on AEW Impact at the time, and we recently were able to see you on AEW Dark Elevation wrestling Julia Hart. Now this is the
Yeah.
second time that you
Mhm.
actually wrestled Julia. The first being past last December at first Holiday Havoc. Do you have any memories working with
Oh yeah.
Julia? And in that dark match, was there any kind of lack of nerves due to your familiarity with her?
I definitely think it helped that my first like dark match on AEW was Julia because it's nice to see someone that across the ring. And granted, we never minus our time in December, we'd never
Right.
wrestled before, even though we both trained and lived in the same area. Just we never crossed paths, but it was nice to be like, oh yeah, I know this person. It really helps the nerves, and you're not so worried about impressing them
Right.
because you already know them.
I feel like Julia is one of those people that they put in there with some of these the people like you who are kind of in there for the single shots that hopefully turn into more. Because I interviewed Haley Shadows recently, who also had a match on Dark with Julia.
Hmm.
Um, that episode of Elevation occurred in Minneapolis, which is basically the general area that you work out of. What's the process like for scheduling that? I'm always interested in that process.
Like the process of
That,
like
like
being
how you get the
backstage.
call, who calls you, those kind of things. You might, I mean, I know that in the past a lot of people told me that QT called them, but I know that they might not want you to say exactly who's making the call. But yeah, the whole process of like getting booked and that kind of thing.
Yeah. I never really know if or when I'm gonna get a call. I just kind of hope when they're coming in the area, they'll send me a little email. And I've always been in contact with Sean Dean. He's been the guy who's been reaching out, and I know that he reached out to me because he was asked by Eric Cannon who were the women in the area, and I'm very fortunate that Cannon mentioned my name. So you get the email, you do the paperwork, you do the test that you need to do beforehand, and then the day of the show, you're there. You're there for most of the day, and you hope you see your name come up on that whiteboard where you get a little match.
When you say the test, is it like COVID testing and health and making sure that you're not going to make anyone sick type of stuff?
COVID testing, there's like certain blood work they want you to do for any bloodborne diseases, and you need to have a physical just to make sure that you're healthy.
Neat. And speaking of COVID, you started your career before the pandemic, and it's obviously continued here into the pandemic and during the time where a lot of things were kind of shut down or minimized. Can you compare wrestling in the what I call the before times and currently?
There's some things that haven't changed, and there's definitely some things that have, especially right after, like, we started wrestling after the break from COVID. There were definitely a bunch of different safety measures that have been more relaxed now. Like, it used to be that I had to show a negative test within, I think, 3 days of the show. And now that most people are vaccinated, we kind of know each other and know that everyone's vaccinated. So we kind of work off of that. And at the start of COVID, we did a lot with social distancing, and we've, required masks and all that. And that's kind of fallen to the wayside as well. But we also don't discourage people from, doing what they need to do to feel safe at our shows.
Yeah, it's definitely a weird time. My first time being in front of more than or not in front, but in a place of 10 people, more than 10 people after all this was an independent show in my area. So I was kind of worried, but I was like, I'm watching a wrestling show. It kind of feels right again. Now, do you typically stay there in the general Minneapolis area? And I ask this question because a lot of times promoters that I've made contact with will email me and ask me if I know anybody. So, do you typically stay in that general vicinity?
It is where I spend most of my time. It's nice. I do also work like a full-time job outside of wrestling. So sometimes it's nice to not have to travel far for a weekend every weekend. But like coming up in December, I've got 3 out-of-town shows that I'm really excited for that I'm going to be making the trek for. But a couple of them haven't been announced yet, so I'm not going to no spoilers. But
right, and I'll talk more about this later. But people can see all of your upcoming dates over their website at freerangekara.com.
Yeah.
Now, you primarily have wrestled in singles, but you've done a good amount of tag matches and multi-person matches. Do you have a preference as to one of them, and why?
That's a good question. I really do enjoy a singles match because I feel like you can tell a better story in a singles match. But also it's really it's a nice breath of fresh air to do like a multi-man or a tag because you get more people in with more ideas. And you get to see, I normally think of wrestling as ABC, but they're thinking of it as 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, I as a fan, I enjoy watching the singles matches. Much like you said, there's more of an ability to tell a story, which is something that I think at times kind of lacks. Sometimes with those, 6-man matches and things like that, which sometimes can be really exciting and fun to watch, but it's also, I grew up watching in the 80s, so that was kind of like every match you saw was that. The 3-man, 4-man matches didn't exist then.
Yeah.
Talked earlier about who some of your favorite opponents are, but do you have a favorite match that you've had so far?
Ooh, that's a good one too. I have all my matches written down, so I should really look through them and see what's a favorite.
Yeah, the Chris Jericho thing for his last book.
Yeah. It might be my first WrestlePalooza because that one is something I had really been looking forward to it for so long. And, again, finally my 5th year of wrestling, I get to make my WrestlePalooza debut. It's the first WrestlePalooza after the pandemic. So the crowd is white hot in energy. and they're, you couldn't do wrong that night. And I got to wrestle Badger Briggs, who I'd had a feud with leading up to, and I really feel like we had a fantastic match. And I like just getting to have that WrestlePalooza singles match, and it makes me happy even
You,
months
you mentioned
later.
earlier that you had some pretty good feelings about Badger Briggs. Did it make it a little bit more special at the being at your first WrestlePalooza?
It really did. I I'm really excited to see how far Badger Briggs goes in wrestling, because they like she's tough as nails, and like she's got a really solid character down, and that's tough to find in your first year of wrestling, is to find who you want to be. And I think she's got it.
Yeah, definitely. Now, over your career, you've wrestled for 22 different promotions, most commonly for Higher Ground Wrestling. However, most of your recent and bookings that you have announced so far coming up are for First Wrestling. Do you have a favorite promotion to work for, and or consider one to be your quote unquote home promotion?
It would probably be a tie between Higher Ground and First. Um, just because I feel like I get really great experiences from both of them. Higher Ground I'd probably call like my first home, but they're taking a break right now, so First has kind of become my home. And I mean, they're both in Minnesota. They're both my local guys, so like I love them both.
Yeah, it's always it's always good to have something that is sort of local. Where I live in Virginia, we get something that pops up a few times, but nothing that really kind of sticks out and is like the local run a show every month type of promotion. And
Mm-hmm.
you've, much like your opponents, you've had some notable tag team partners, people like Ty Valkyrie and ODB. But your most common tag partner is Sebastian Taylor. Do you have a favorite of all of your partners?
Um, I mean, probably Sebastian, because we were an actual tag team, not just a one-off tag for a night. Although I will say that tag match with me and ODB versus Brooke Valentine and Victoria was I have a very special memory behind that match. That like the very first time I ever saw live women's wrestling, um, it was not Taya Valkyrie, sorry, Victoria as Tara versus ODB at Impact Wrestling. So that was the very first women's match that I ever saw live. And then to years later, tag with them and wrestle them was really cool for me.
I just love Victoria. I'll go to like the
Hmm.
conventions on occasion, and as someone to fans, she's just like super warm and willing to just sit there and talk for however long. Um, Speaking of Victoria,
Hmm.
recently you wrestled at First Saturday Nitro. Uh, you wrestled in the Mall of America. You wrestled against Billy Starks. This is certainly a star-studded event, and your match was no exception because Victoria was the referee for your match. I watched this. I watched this event as it was happening, and I thought that was a great match. First of all,
Hmm.
what was it like being in the ring with a legend such as Victoria, and what did you learn from her that night, as well as in your other interactions with her?
Well, I've learned that it's very, very important to be nice to the people on your way up, because you'll meet them going back down. She is literally the nicest person you'll
Right.
ever meet in wrestling, and she'll tell you herself she doesn't like keep up with current wrestling, so she's like not trying to offer us advice other than the stuff that she knows from when she was wrestling. She likes to where's my sentence go? She's just an awesome person to work with, and that's not the first time I've had her as my referee. We actually had one at a synagogue show before the pandemic. It was myself versus Blair Onyx, with Victoria as our referee. So it's nice that I get to keep seeing her and keep interacting with her. But having her there for that Mall of America show was just like the icing on the cake, because she's such a nice person. And I just love being
Yeah,
around her.
that was a show that got a little bit of a play too because there were some bigger names there doing signings and stuff like that. But also it was on Fight, so anyone out there can go back. I think it's like $11.95 or something like that. Pretty inexpensive, but it was a great show, so I recommend anyone going back and watching that. Now, wrestling Billy. Billy is, obviously a little bit younger than you. She's not quite 18 years old yet. Are there any special considerations needed to wrestle someone who, is not of, like, I guess, legal age, for lack of a better term?
Unless I were to offer her a beer in the ring, I don't think there's much that we'd have to worry about. I mean, she's a professional, even at such a young age. Like it boggles my mind still. She's 10 years younger than me, and it's wild how successful she's been, and I'm happy for her. But yeah, I don't think of her as any different just because she's so much younger. She's got a good brain for wrestling, and she knows what she's doing.
She's 10 years younger than you, and she has like 4 years of experience already. I was supposed to have her on the show not too long ago, but that kind of fell through as far as like scheduling and stuff like that. But I was really looking forward to that, so hopefully I can get that rescheduled. But do you prefer intergender / mixed tag matches to straight women's matches? And I mean, do you have a preference?
They've each got their unique little niches. Like, I feel like it's very easy for me to plan an intergender match because it's kind of laid out for you. Like, they're just gonna cheer me regardless, even if they've never met me before, because I'm wrestling a guy. They want me to win. Whereas, when it's just, I shouldn't say when it's a women's match, we get to do more of that broader storytelling where we can pick different things we want to do instead of it's like, ooh, guy, girl.
Every match I've seen you in, you've kind of been like the outgoing, bubbly baby face. Do you ever work heel?
I've done it very sparingly. Kara Noya did a couple heel matches in Wisconsin. I guess I'm a bad guy in Wisconsin.
They eat too much dairy. Past or present, who would your dream opponent be?
Ooh. Well, past would probably be Victoria.
Right.
I mean, I just can't get enough of her. And present, who have I always wanted to? Well, I guess that would be past two. Gail Kim. I wanted to get in the ring with Gail Kim, but she's retired now. Present. Who's out there? Let's see. Sorry, my mind always blanks. People ask me these questions. I forget every wrestler who's ever existed.
So many people too, because you're probably thinking like everyone that you could possibly imagine right now.
Yeah, and I'm like thinking about WWE, NXT, Impact, AEW. I guess the one that popped into my head was Chris Statlander. I think it'd be cool to wrestle Chris Statlander.
The stock answer for that, people usually give me a Charlotte Flair. I think everybody would want to wrestle her.
Oh yeah, see.
What is something about you that even people in your closest inner circle would be surprised to learn about you?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'm a pretty open book with the people I'm close to. I don't know. Let's see. I don't know. I really don't know. I'm pretty open book with my people.
It's always good.
Maybe like people who aren't like in my inner circle. Like I have a spot on chicken impression.
Would you like to exhibit that, or?
I might as well if I said it. All right.
And free range Kara never struts around the ring doing that?
I mean, I have, but I don't think the crowd hears it half the time because once you start doing like the chicken arm flaps, then they all like start chanting chicken, so they can't really. That
would be better on like a more mic'd building.
Yeah.
Very good. Now, coming up, I believe your next appearance is going to be for First Wrestling up on Saturday, November 26th in Minneapolis at the James Ballantyne Uptown VFW Post 246 at 2916 Lindale South. Tickets are now available out there
Yeah.
for the price of $30, which can be purchased on Eventbrite. What can fans expect to see out of you at this show?
Ooh, I don't know. They haven't. I haven't. I have no idea who I'm facing. So it's been a long time. Well, not a long time. I guess the last time I was there, I wrestled Kimberly. So I can feel like I can only like I
Right.
gotta have another banger. I gotta have another great match. So I'm gonna be pulling out
How
all
did
the
that match go with
stops.
Kimberly?
It was fantastic. She was someone I'd always wanted to wrestle, and I was hoping I'd get to wrestle her back when first did kind of like a mostly women's show at the VFW. But I think she ended up facing, was it Jessica Havoc? And that was a
Right.
great match, as always. And one of those people that, like, she's been a lot of places and done a lot of things. And it was really cool to get to wrestle her.
So, with all these people that you've had the opportunity to work with, and we already talked a little bit about it with Victoria, um, do people typically, seeing someone like you who doesn't maybe have the experience that they do they typically offer advice? Do you seek out advice? How do those kind of interactions go?
Yeah, I seek out advice from all of my opponents. Because, even if you've been doing something one way for the last 5 years, they may say, hey, have you ever thought about doing it like this? And, not everyone's going to have useful advice, but you never know if it's going to be useful unless you ask. So I try not to offer advice unless someone asks me, but like I'll
Right.
take all
I
the
guess
advice.
even if something's not useful today, that's not to say it's not going to be useful 3 months from now.
Hmm.
Um, Lastly, do you have any message you'd like to say to all your fans out there?
Yeehaw! Probably just thank you guys so much for supporting me as I transition to this new character. I've been having so much fun wrestling, and I feel like I've really found like my person, like who I'm supposed to be in wrestling, and I'm really, really been enjoying all my matches, and I'm so excited for the
Yeah, I haven't
future.
really seen any Karanoia matches, but I've seen all the work I've seen of yours was free range Kara matches. So it definitely seems like you're pretty comfortable in there, and probably a large part of that is because that's a little bit more of who you are. How long have you been doing free range Kara?
I started May of 2021, so about a year and a half.
Okay. And I want to let everyone know how to get in touch with or how to follow, get in touch, everything with Kara. Go to Facebook, facebook.com/freerangekara. Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, TikTok, all those you could follow her at freerangekara. Even though the name, when you spell it out, has a hyphen in it, those do not. She has a pro wrestling tees store at prowrestlingtees.com. Searching Karanoia. Mentioned earlier the website, Free Range Kara, which also you have some merchandise available there, as well as fans can see the upcoming bookings. They have a Patreon page at patreon.com/Free Range Kara. I get a lot of good little perks there. Your YouTube page, which when I found the link, I was wondering about it, but when you mentioned when you got into wrestling, it makes more sense. YouTube.com/user
Yes.
/Mr. Punk's girl.
Or you can just
Or you can
type
type
free
free
range
range
Kara and
Kara.
it'll show up. I'm embarrassed that it shows up as Mr. Punk's girl.
Well, I apologize for embarrassing you. And
That's okay.
yep, so that's where you can get. Kara, you told me in the email that you had a big cartel store. I couldn't find the link on that as much as I tried.
Yes, if you go to freerangekara.com, it's the merchandise is Big Cartel. So if you go to the website,
Okay, cool.
it works
Yep,
out
so go to
perfect.
Free Range Kara and get that. And then obviously on social media, she'll tell you where she's working, and that's where I noticed that there was the link to Eventbrite. So those are kind of your one-stop shops for everything Free Range Kara. So on that note, Kara, I just want to thank you for coming on, and definitely appreciate it.
Oh yeah, thanks again so much for
Anytime.
having me. It was a
Thanks
blast.
for coming on, and we will talk to everyone else next time. Thanks for tuning in to the FCR Interviews.